Good morning to everyone who has joined. Thank you very much for joining as we've put together some key highlights from our 10x Investments 2021 10x Retirement Reality Report. Just kind of context as well for those of you who aren't familiar, this is the 4th edition of the Retirement Reality Report. The findings from this report come out of the 2021 Brand Atlas survey, which tracks the lifestyles of a universe of 15 million economically active South Africans. The definition for economically active are those living in households with a monthly income of greater than 8,000 Rand. And as we are kind of moving into the 4th edition, we're starting to build up quite a good data set to look at trends year on year. And I think more importantly, with the 2021 edition, is certainly to have a look at the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had. Certainly, the COVID-19 pandemic has certainly given many South Africans a taste of what life with little or no income potentially could be like, which is certainly a fate, I think, that awaits many at the end of their working lives, unless some of the trends that have been highlighted in the report start to change and start to change dramatically. So jumping into some of the key findings, and I think before we do, it's also important to provide context. So context in a South African context, when you're looking at retirement savings, which are typically generated by saving a portion of your income when you are employed, I think the employment context in South Africa is also an important consideration. So whilst there are many South Africans who are currently working and many of them are underprepared for retirement, South Africa actually has the highest unemployment rate in the world. The Q2 number stood at the official rate at 34%, and that increases as you move down to the 25 to 34 cohort. That jumps up to just below 43%. And if you look at the youth bracket, it's as high as 64%. Now, there are many people who are currently excluded from employment and are trying to break into the current job market. What this means is that those who are fortunate enough to be employed have very little chance of working past their retirement age if they haven't prepared sufficiently and need to try supplement their retirement savings. So it's really unlikely, given that you've got this big push of many people who are currently excluded from formal employment trying to seek work. Those who aren't prepared are going to find it really hard to supplement their income going forward past the official retirement age of 65. Speaking to respondents, or asking the question of respondents, how do you feel about your current retirement plan? 50% of people surveyed in the 2021 report said that they don't have a retirement savings plan. Now, this is a negative trend. It's up from 2020, where it was 49%, and also up year on year from 2019, where it was 46%. If you include those with only a vague idea, this collective group jumps to 71% of people, indicating that they either have no savings plan or a very vague idea of their plan. The percentage of people surveyed who said they feel good or pretty good about their retirement plan has also tracked in the wrong direction. 29% this year compared to 30% in 2020 and 33% in 2019. So overall, the picture is looking worse. And why is it important to just be engaged with a plan as the starting point, not necessarily where you are in your plan? Well, if you do have a plan and you're engaged with it, you can proactively assess where you are in your savings journey and what you need to do to hopefully provide sufficient savings for yourself in retirement. Whereas if you're not engaged at all, it's that ticking time bomb. If you're not engaged, you're not going to take the right steps to try address and improve the outcome. South Africa's inequality, I think, is also represented in some of the polar responses that we've seen, with the negative trend sort of being exacerbated with the majority of respondents having this kind of trend really trending worse, with less people having a plan and retirement plan being vague. Whereas on the far right-hand side, you can see that those that have a thought-through plan that they're executing has actually improved. So kind of 6% in 2019, 6% in 2020. And so there is this small cohort of individuals in South Africa who are actually feeling better about their current retirement plan, whilst the majority are actually in a worse off position. Of those, so looking specifically at the cohort of those who said they do not have a retirement plan, the question was asked, well, why do you not have one? And resoundingly, the response from people surveyed was that 64% of people said that they simply did not have any money and could not afford to save because there was nothing left at the end of the month, really indicating that the COVID pandemic has reduced South Africans' ability to save from retirement. You can see that big step up from 56% up to 64%. Life has got harder for so many, and it seems that illusions appear to have been diminished, with the number of respondents surveyed indicating that retirement savings is not a priority at this stage of their life, actually being reduced. So I think there are a lot of negative trends in that the survey is pointing to, and it is quite difficult to try pull out some positives. But if we had to try pull out a positive, the fact that more respondents have said that, look, it's not a priority for me at this stage of my life, and if that means that people are more engaged with the problem, even if they're not able to do anything about it right now, engagement has always historically been one of the key issues. So trying to find some positive that may be one of the positives we can pull out of this report. So kind of to summarize some of those first initial findings, there's really been kind of a move away from the middle ground, with the responses of either pretty good idea really being sort of diminished to either an increase of those who are executing really well, whilst the majority of responses have actually said we're in actually a worse off position of either not having a plan at all or having a very vague idea of the plan. So we've kind of had that those sort of polar moves, and 22% of retirement savings, not a priority at this stage of my life, is down from 29% last year, and actually pulled out a number from 2019, which is down from 36%. So significant improvement of respondents saying that's not a priority at this stage of their life, but there's still the vast majority that stick to other retirement savings fantasies, such as I will address it later in life and it's not a priority now. Going on to that point and really asking respondents how long do they think that they have to save for retirement, what you can see is that 48% of people surveyed said that they think that they can save for retirement in less than 30 years. That number's actually increased from last year, where the number was 46% last year. And I think at this point, one needs to step back and say, okay, this is the view of respondents in the survey, but let's look at kind of the actual hard numbers and what impact that has. So many think that they can save for retirement in just 30 years, but the difference between saving for retirement in 40 years versus 30 years is that if you save for retirement in 40 years, you can expect to have a retirement income that's 83% higher than if you're only saving for 30 years. It's a high level assumption that in the context of kind of a consistent savings plan, where you're earning a net real return of 5% per annum, it's a good indication of that impact that delaying retirement savings will have on your eventual retirement outcome. The chart on the right is also quite interesting, as it shows the value foregone at retirement as a multiple of a withdrawal at different stages in your investing journey. So a withdrawal at age 25 effectively means that you will have 12 times less that value in retirement savings at retirement. Or put another way, is that amount withdrawn would have grown by 12 times in real terms after inflation. So really showing the magnitude of early withdrawals. The question was asked of respondents at what stage they plan on retiring. And what's quite interesting here is that 35% of respondents under 35 believe that retiring below the age of 60 is achievable. And you contextualize that and you say, okay, so you've got a relatively large part of the working force under the age of 35, and a large cohort, more than 1/3 of this cohort believes that they will be able to retire before age 60. And you contextualize that with those respondents who are over 50. Only 5% of over 50s actually considered retiring before the age of 60 as realistic. So there's this big disconnect between younger savers' expectations versus older savers' realities. Amongst those 50 years and older, 71% have basically kind of indicated that their retirement reality is going to almost need them to work beyond the age of 64. Well, at least they expect that they will need to continue working beyond the age of 64. And that really indicates that they're not financially prepared for retirement. So again, we're seeing this big disconnect between young savers' expectations versus that actual reality that most South Africans are finding themselves in when they reach closer to that retirement age. And I think this is probably a good point. I mean, we raised it at the beginning for context, but it's a good point just to point back to kind of the unemployment crisis in South Africa, especially for those in the younger age groups. And again, contextualize the fact that it's going to be really hard for many South Africans to continue working over the age of 65, even if they have to try supplement their retirement savings, because you have this massive push of people who are desperately trying to seek employment, and kind of you've got this big push of young employment seekers coming into the workforce, which will typically push those that reach retirement age out of the workforce and not really enable them with the ability to continue working, even if they really need to from a retirement preparedness perspective. Going on to the next question, looking at the subset of those who claim to have some sort of savings plan, 79% worry that they won't have enough to live on after they retire or feel unsure about this, is an increase up from 75% last year. So compared to 2020, when we look at 2021, people are less certain that they will have enough money to retire on when they reach retirement. So again, kind of from a perception perspective, we're seeing kind of this negative trend. And then asked the question, I expect that I'll need to keep earning some money after I retire. Well, 74% believe that they will have to generate some income after they retire. 19% are not very sure, which means that there's only really 7% that are confident that they won't have to earn additional income in retirement to support their lifestyle. And this number's down from 12% in 2020. So again, negative trend impact of COVID-19 impacting people's preparedness for retirement. High levels of concern are, and this is quite an interesting point as well. So often we know that South Africa has a very unequal society in terms of income and wealth. But the concern about not having sufficient money in retirement was actually present across all income brackets. So the survey looked at different income brackets as well. And the high income bracket was classified as household incomes over 50,000 Rand a month. And And in that cohort, 6% of people, only 6% of people responded to say that they don't think that they'll have to earn more money in retirement. And when compared to all the other brackets, so kind of the mid income and the lower income brackets, that number was 7%. So the concern is evident across all swathes of the South African society, regardless of the level of income. It's about how prepared am I to support that level of income in retirement, and I think that's certainly one thing that is consistent regardless of where you sit on the spectrum. The survey also looked at trends between males and females, and historically there's always been a significant gender gap with males indicating that they are more prepared for retirement or have or a high proportion having a better savings plan in place. What we've seen this year compared to previous years is that gender gap has significantly narrowed, but it's for all the wrong reasons. The responses, as you'll see, is that there's been a significant deterioration in kind of from men in 2021 compared to 2020. So ask the question, are you not doing well financially or unsure? 80% of men responded saying that they were not doing well financially or they were unsure of how they were doing. This compared to 79% of women. So you can see kind of there's parity there between kind of the concerns between men and women about how they're doing financially. But when you compare the 2021 results to 2020, you can see there's that significant deterioration with 11%, the move from kind of 69% to 80% for men, whereas with women, we've also seen a deterioration, but the starting point was a lot worse in 2020, moving from 75% not doing well or unsure up to 79%. And as you'll also see on your copy of the report, last year, 4% of men described themselves as doing very well financially versus 2% of women. This year, that number for men has also fallen to 2%, and it stayed consistent for women. So the gap between men and women has narrowed, but for all the wrong reasons. So really nothing to celebrate here. I mean, ultimately, I think the aim and what we'd like to see is consistent improvement across all the cohorts, but unfortunately, things have just deteriorated in this picture. The question was asked of respondents if they had ever been part of a corporate retirement scheme, and more than half of those who had retirement savings plans had at some point belonged to a corporate retirement savings fund. So 53% of respondents had belonged to some sort of corporate retirement savings fund. So you can quite clearly see that compulsory kind of savings through an employer scheme is certainly probably key to addressing the retirement savings crisis in South Africa. But asked what their level of knowledge about their corporate retirement savings schemes were, respondents, only 39% of respondents believed that they had a good understanding of their fund. About a quarter admitted to having no idea at all, and 7% of them said that they were not really that interested. So this is an improvement. In 2020, 11% said they weren't really interested. That number's dropped to 7% in 2021. So again, indicating potentially greater engagement with the problem. But there's still a full 36% of respondents that said that they knew little but wished that they knew more, which really I think presents an obvious opportunity for education in the corporate retirement fund space to really try equip and engage members in the corporate retirement fund space to, one, be aware of where they are and what they need to do to enable themselves and to prepare sufficiently for retirement. So our inaugural report in 28 was published in 2018 that really made it clear that South Africa was sitting on a retirement time bomb, and things were bad then. And what we've established since that first report is really that there has been a steady deterioration of financial preparedness for retirement across South Africans. The pandemic has certainly magnified acute financial distress for many South Africans. They were already feeling that, and that's been somewhat exacerbated. And it's made it harder to save for retirement. But really, I think it's presented an opportunity to really say, well, we've been through a period where some people have not been kind of sufficiently prepared to live with their income impacted. It almost provides somewhat of a lens, I think, of what many South Africans may feel when they reach retirement and are unable to maintain the same standard of living in retirement that they enjoyed whilst working. So it's really key that to see why everyone, if they're able to, certainly makes the right provision. I think there are two key areas that can potentially contribute to turning this problem around. One is certainly from a policy perspective and policy initiatives like something like compulsory saving, not necessarily through a government-sponsored plan, but just where anyone's working, if you're forced to kind of save a portion of your income for retirement, whether that's in a public sector or private sector scheme, it potentially may improve retirement outcomes. You see this in many other areas in the world. And other initiatives like compulsory preservation, but with partial access in terms of periods of financial distress, may also go a long way to ensuring that we don't see this flood of early withdrawals. One certainly needs to be cognizant of the fact that if you're falling on hard times and you've got this big pot of, or relatively big pot of savings in a retirement vehicle, it certainly does make sense to kind of provide access to individuals when they're falling on hard times. But often what happens is that most South Africans will withdraw their entire retirement savings, and that might not necessarily be necessary to fund their kind of short-term income requirements. So compulsory preservation with partial access, which is currently on the table, I think certainly may go a long way to also kind of improve outcomes. So that's from the policy initiative side. And then I think the other side is to say, well, where individuals are saving, to try increase engagement. And we have seen that's the one positive trend we've seen, is that people are potentially more aware of their situation in 2021, and ultimately to increase that engagement, increase that awareness, just to understand what one needs to be doing now so that you can avoid a retirement that has not been adequately prepared for. And kind of let's call it the third part. So one is kind of the policy work that needs to be done. The second is around sort of engagement. And the third is obviously to say, well, of the retirement saving solutions that are available, savers need to get the most bang for their buck. So kind of really focus on lower cost options, which has certainly come through in the default investment strategy, as well as solutions that increase the probability of really members meeting their investment goals. So those are kind of potential 3-year suggestions in terms of how we can really try to arrest, I think, the negative trends that we certainly have picked up in the 2021 version of the Retirement Reality Report. So thanks for attending. These are just some of the key highlights from the report that we thought we would extract and talk you through. But it's really packed with lots of examples of the similar trend. I mean, that's really, I think, the one thing that we can say. The trend has been relatively negative, and we've seen it through multiple different lenses, whether that's through kind of the gender gap narrowing for all the wrong reasons, or the lack of preparedness, or those who have indicated a decrease of certainty around their savings plan. Through all these different lenses, you're seeing kind of this negative trend, with kind of the one positive being that there appears that the financial stress and hardship over the last 12 to 18 months has maybe focused the light on the problem, and there maybe is starting to be an improvement in terms of engagement, albeit that many South Africans feel that they aren't in a position to necessarily improve their situation currently. So I think in terms of what we wanted to take you through, those are some of the highlights. I'm not sure if there are any questions either about some of the key trends that we've highlighted or other points in the survey. We'd certainly be happy to take those at this point.
Thank you, Chris. Very insightful. Nice, high sort of high view of it. I'm sorry, not the greatest news in there, but I'm wondering if any of the journalists out there would like to ask Chris any questions while we have him online and captive. I don't see that there are any questions, which is a little bit surprising. Nope.
If you go on, it's Chris Brits on this side. The chat seems to be disabled, so we can't actually put any questions in there.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Hold on, Murray, are you online?
I am, yes.
Chats. Chris is saying that it's disabled.
The settings are set to have it enabled. I'll just go double check.
Okay, so Chris, do you want to fire away in the meantime, Chris Brits?
Yes, I'm happy to. Well done, guys. Very great report. I mean, you guys, certainly highlighting some really interesting and very disturbing facts of our industry. Maybe not just related to the survey itself. I just want your comment on. I've just recently published an article, and the sort of trend by employers, some allowing people to resign to get their retirement benefits and then reinstating them afterwards seems to be back. There's been a few reports of that happening lately, and one can understand it, from a desperation point of view. But what has been your experience as 10X as an administrator in that regard? Have you had any of that on your side?
We haven't. It hasn't been a kind of a standout trend that we've specifically seen with the participating employers that form part of the 10X umbrella retirement funds. So we haven't kind of picked up on that trend, but I think from what you certainly said is that potentially you could understand the need or the requirement, but really I think it more importantly, it probably highlights the need for appropriate policy, which the ball's obviously rolling on, to potentially enable to enable retirement savers not to be put in that position. Firstly, because it obviously potentially puts them at risk of not having employment. We've seen the employment situation in South Africa, and secondly, in that environment, majority of savers who cash out will cash out their entire lump sum, even if they don't necessarily need that, and then potentially not in a position to know how to manage it appropriately for the long term, and that kind of cash windfall is immediately spent, even if the full lump sum isn't required to tide an individual over. So in short, we haven't seen that trend, but I can certainly understand why that has been the case over the last 12 or 18 months, given the hardship.
Chris, can I ask you, Chris Brits, you say that there are examples of this happening. Are people open and honest about it? That, it's a terrifying idea that people will give up their jobs to access their retirement savings. But yes, I guess if you do it in agreement with your employer, it's different from just giving up your job and hoping.
Yeah, certainly. The article I'm referring to is one that's been just recently that I published on another one of the big umbrella funds in the country, where they've certainly seen this sort of trend happening. I'm assuming that would have been maybe with one or two employers, and that it's not that widespread, and one would certainly hope not. But they have certainly seen that happening, at some of the participating employers to their umbrella fund, and that's quite scary. I think they obviously nipped it in the bud. I hope that when they realised that this was happening, that they did communicate with the employer or employers in question. But still, yeah, one gets what's happening out there, but it's obviously not something that one would very much encourage at all.
It's a shocker. Wow. I see that Gareth has a question. Gareth Stokes.
Hi, yes, Gareth Stokes from FA News. Just a quick question. I understood that this process of resigning from a fund and then being re-employed is actually illegal. I mean, it's a contravention of the legislation. The press at the moment is writing as if it's a trend that's emerging. I mean, it would be alarming to me if we have an illegal trend emerging.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that comment as well, and especially kind of if it is, if it's sort of a trend that administrators are picking up on.
Well, that's a very complex thing, isn't it? It's, if your dilemma is paying your rent, as Chris, as we have considered in looking at all of this data, if you are stuck between a rock and a hard place, what do you do? It's extremely difficult, which is perhaps why Treasury's suggestion that they will allow early access to a portion of retirement savings on condition that the rest is reserved for retirement is perhaps a sort of middle road.
If I can just comment, Siobhan, I think, yeah, it's absolutely, I mean, one understands where it's all coming from, but it's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back kind of thing, because it certainly doesn't alleviate the situation from a retirement perspective. It does address maybe some immediate concerns, from a cash flow perspective where people are in absolute dire straits, one understands that. But it doesn't all go well for eventual retirement because it just reduces the pot.
Yeah, I guess so. But the idea that you can take a third of your savings, which you can't take anyway in retirement as a lump sum, is perhaps a fair middle path. Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask Chris?
I can ask one more quickly on the report itself. That's Gareth. Just looking at our unemployment problem, my concern is that when governments take steps to address this unemployment problem, we tend to create jobs in the real low income segment. And the sense that I get is that people in that very low income segment are pretty much hanging on for the state old age grant from age 60. How do we go about, I don't know, addressing this other than maybe focusing more on higher income opportunities in the job market?
Look, I think it's obviously a very complex question, but I mean, if you let's kind of take a step back and you try to still kind of what the point of retirement provision for retirement savings are. It is ultimately to say once you've stopped working, regardless of kind of your level of income, it's about being able to maintain kind of your standard of living, whatever that standard is in retirement once you've stopped working. So 100% kind of agree with you there. Obviously the focus in terms of there's so many people currently excluded from formal employment, and sort of certainly the low hanging fruit is certainly creating, trying to bring the majority of people who are currently excluded into the formal workplace, and the easiest way to do that is certainly with lower income jobs. But I think that the next point to your question is to say, well, even if it's not necessarily higher income opportunities, but it's lower income jobs, is there maybe an argument to be made where anyone who's formally employed, you need to kind of make retirement savings compulsory? Now, that's certainly not to say that it needs to be compulsory through a state-run scheme that almost, let's say, kind of you take kind of the Australian super type market, superannuation market, where kind of if you are employed, you have to belong to, you have to have legally some formal retirement savings in place, whether that's public sector or private sector, whatever the case is. I think those type of policy type initiatives where whatever it is, it doesn't matter if you're earning, if your household income is 8,000 Rand or your household income is 50,000 Rand, that a relative percentage of that is kind of put away to provide for yourself when you reach retirement, so that you can maintain that same standard of living. If that means that, well, kind of that state pension is sufficient to maintain your standard of living, well, then that's kind of a moot point. But I think in most situations and scenarios, that isn't the case. That's potentially one thing that I think could be done. But I mean, it's not, I think the starting point is just to try get more people into formal employment. I mean, obviously, I think the higher income opportunities, I guess, would be ideal. But I think it's just to enable people to put bread on the table as a starting point, I think is really key. And in and of itself, more people becoming more economically active and spending more money in the economy kind of creates this virtuous circle. That's kind of my view on that.
Okie doke. Anybody else? Any further questions?
Siobhan, Chris Brits, EBNet again. Just a quick one as well. You know, what can we do collectively as an industry? I mean, from the journalist sort of side, I know my friends like Gareth and people like Bruce Cameron and many other financial writers spend a lot of time, you know, carrying this message out into the wide world out there. But it obviously doesn't reach everybody. I mean, obviously there's a massive amount of people that are not exposed to our mediums. You know, so as an industry, I mean, you know, we need to do more. We need to do more from an educational point of view, you know, even start with the stuff in school, you know, try and educate people from as early age possible. But then at the end of the day, we still sit with the reality that you guys have just pointed out in terms of your stats, you know, the high unemployment rate that we have as a country, all these issues. I mean, it's really trying to throw the tsunami back into the sea with a little, you know, beach bucket, and it's a tricky job. But you know, as an industry, we try and do more. And my question to you is, what do you guys think is there? What else can we do? What else is there that we can do as a collective to try and change these things around?
I think that thanks for the question, Chris. I think there are two key things, and you alluded to one of them in your question, is that kind of one, and this is probably the second point, is what medium is information conveyed, and is it reaching enough eyeballs, enough ears? Are people taking it in? But I think before you even address kind of what medium is information being delivered, and is it complex? Is it do people not necessarily engage in it because it's too technical? Is you've got to say, like a lot of people, one, either they're not interested in saving for retirement, they're not engaged in it as a topic, or they're kind of the day-to-day life and kind of hardship means that it's not a priority. So how are you able to kind of, the key is to kind of, is the information as simple and as easy to understand, and can you package it in such a way that it is engaging with people where currently it's not? So it's kind of, you're seeing some examples of this in other environments. There's often like the talk of gamification. Are you able to kind of package information in a medium which can appeal to a broader subset, where kind of standard kind of more technical content either people aren't interested in, or it's too technical and difficult to understand? And I think using technology, there's certainly an opportunity, I think, to try contextualize the problem of retirement saving and what needs to be done about it in a simple, more easy to understand format, where I mean, the big goal I think that needs to be done is how do you bring this thing that is so distant, that's 30, 40 years away, how can you make people understand and realize the need and the impact of it in today's term when there are so many other difficulties around? And I don't know whether kind of technology potentially starts providing the answer for that, but it certainly, I think, the message needs to be delivered in multiple different mediums, where currently it's maybe more delivered in kind of the more formal type approaches. So simplistic messaging, how can you make it really get down to kind of the core, kind of shift through all the technical jargon and really get to the core crux of the issue as simply as possible, and then deliver it as easily as possible to as wide an audience as possible, I guess. But most people we don't really have the answer in terms of how we will do that yet. But hopefully, maybe kind of there are tech-based solutions that may make it easier going forward.
If I can just add there, I think it's one thing that's very important is that we need a cultural shift where we start talking about saving for retirement, investing and saving, etc., in a wider context. It's not just about, increasing your wealth. It's everybody should be saving. As much as, we learn a lot of really basic things at school that we never actually get an opportunity to apply. This is an important step. Actually, this is part of working. This is part of earning an income. This is a very important aspect of having a job. And I think we think of it as something separate, and I don't think that serves anyone. But I would like to let Marilyn from You've Earned It have a moment.
Thanks, Siobhan. Yeah, You've Earned It is a digital media platform for South Africans over 60s, and we are coming from a place where we are chatting or hearing from people at ground level. So talking about retirees, pensioners, senior citizens, etc., people who are retired and who are coming up for retirement. And I agree with so many things that have been said of late. Chris, you said something about making the educational side of it. So many of these finance articles are actually just people gloss over because they don't understand what the heck's going on. Needs to be simpler and aimed at the person in the street out there. It's too complicated. I remember from my pre-You've Earned It days was spent 30 years at the University of Cape Town, and I probably fall into I fall into that category where, yes, we were saving through the corporate retirement scheme. I didn't understand what was going on. I trusted that the trustees were actually doing the best that they could for us, but I certainly didn't understand it, and I would have loved to have understood it. To me, it's when we talk to retirees these days, they need to be learned, that they acquire so much knowledge, so many skills along the journey of employment, but they have not a clue about how to become an entrepreneur and how to actually provide for themselves by starting up their own little business, using their own skills and knowledge and experience after retirement. By the way, I think retirement it's like the dodo bird. We should actually just get rid of it. But anyway, so I think that kind of thing, there's so much that we should be teaching people, giving people educational articles that they can actually understand, teaching them how to become entrepreneurs, teaching them from a young age from school, carry it on through organizations that they will be involved in, and incorporate somehow a retirement scheme that you have to belong to. That's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Marilyn. Alice, do you want to ask a question?
Hi, actually just a comment from my side back onto the earlier discussion about what can be done. I think we should try and learn more from what's working financially in other industries. So, for example, so many people have funeral policies. Funeral policies is this cultural, it's part of the culture. It's something you just do. So people are able to find money and put money into funeral policies. How do we get saving for retirement almost to be as ingrained in cultures as funeral policies, I would say? And so I think a lot can be learned from there in terms of literally it's just making it part of lives. And again, then the communication channels. So we do so much in the tech space, but a lot of people just don't have access to the internet, where we have to accept that South Africa is still at that level with many people. So it's going back to these connecting with people in real life, on a one-to-one basis. And I think that is a major challenge that South Africa is facing.
Good point. Chris, Brits?
Thanks, Siobhan. Yeah, two things really. This is my last bit, to contribute is I agree with what Marilyn and Alice said. In terms of our communication, things need to be put across more simpler, and I think that's a big responsibility we as industry and media have to try and get the message across in a much more distinct and understandable fashion. The other thing, and then I want to just pick up on what Chris talked about earlier. Chris Eddy talked about earlier on the the technology playing a role in this. Now I've got access to some really interesting developments that are taking place currently by using people that are onboarding at companies, using things like augmented reality, virtual reality, these sort of programs within which you can embed quite a lot of sort of video content, animation, graphs, projections, all kinds of stuff, both on your retirement fund as well as on the medical aid side, where you can actually put people through a very, very engaging experience and take them through this whole process and their choices that they have to make at that very crucial stage when they join a company. And if you do it properly and you use those programs correctly, you can actually make quite an impact on that individual in getting them to understand at a very, very early age of what this thing is all about, what the effect of subsequent actions from their side can be on the long-term goal of retirement. So it's a very engaging kind of process, and that's the kind of stuff that I want to see come into the market, because it uses technology, it uses simplistic things, but it's done in a very, very good way to kind of in an immersive environment, which you learn a lot by going through a process like that. And that's the kind of stuff I would like to sort of promote and push out there. So that we've got the tech, it's there, it's available.
Yeah, that's very exciting. I love the idea. I mean, when people join a company and they go to the presentation about their retirement fund, it's just another box to tick, but as you say, using this new augmented reality may be the thing, maybe the key. Marilyn, you wanted to ask something else?
No, I think I've had my say.
Okay, well, if you want to have another say, you'd be more than welcome. Chris.
Sorry, Sean. Yeah, just to close up on that, on what you said now, just as well, people sitting in a PowerPoint environment and they're filling in forms and they, do the normal thing that they do at every company. They've actually researched this a bit, and you will find that your success rate on putting somebody through a virtual reality or augmented reality type program actually is 4 times higher than having them sit through death by PowerPoint and they sit through this blooming presentation. So the stuff really, really, really works, and that's certainly that's the future. We need to grab these things and start exploring it, because the technology is there. It's really just up to us to find creative ways of bringing this very, very remote concept. I think Chris also talked about it earlier. Retirement is a very remote concept for most people, and to kind of bring that into a here and now understanding, I think, is crucial, and that's what these programs can achieve. So it's really very useful to do that.
I like that idea. Well, I think that's about it. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you especially for your engagement. It makes me feel a little bit more positive to hear that everyone's saying, okay, we know there's a problem. We've got this data that we all know there's a problem. It's, you know, it's very clear that we're moving in the wrong direction. And what can we all do, and how can we change the culture? And, you know, let's keep talking about it. Let's keep improving it. So we are the last generation of South Africans that 9 out of 10 people are heading for disaster in their so-called golden years. Anyway, Chris, would you like to say anything else as we say goodbye? Chris, Eddy?
Yeah, thanks. Just thanks again for everyone for joining and for the comments and questions. I think I'll echo your sentiment, Siobhan. I think we all know what the problem is. Certainly, I think the 4th edition of the 10X Retirement Reality Report reaffirms what we already knew was in place, and actually points to the fact that the trend might even be worsening. But it's about keeping it front of mind and trying to just raise those levels of engagements, which I think needs persistent work. It's a massive problem, but we need to continue to try chip away at it as much as possible. So thanks for joining, and I hope that you guys all have a fantastic Monday.
Thanks so much, Chris, and thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your engagement, and please stay in touch. Let's keep talking.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Cheers.
Good job.
Lots.
Bye.
Yeah.